Cincinnati, what a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady, from 1 to 80, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.
Hey everybody, this is Jack Greiner, and I'm here with my partner Randy Freaking, and we're pleased to welcome you to another edition of We Love Our Team. And we're very pleased today to welcome as our guest Marty Brennaman to the podcast. Amanda is a native of Ashland, Kentucky, and a graduate of Marshall University, where she earned a bachelor's and master's degree. She is married to former Reds broadcaster Marty Brennaman, and along with Marty, serves as a spokesperson for Laura's Lean Beef. Amanda, welcome. How are you?
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here. I got to pick up my dog. She's already like, what are you doing, Mom? Come on. And this is Millie Brennaman.
All right. Two for the price
We've had
one.
dogs in the audience before, Amanda. So
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm glad.
Yes,
Hi, girly.
yes. Well, Millie seems to be well behaved, unlike another dog that we will.
I don't know about that. She wants all my attention, and when I'm talking to other people, if she barks, she knows she gets treats because that will shut her up. But we're gonna try to get through this without you barking like crazy.
Millie has trained you. It sounds like
100% for sure.
That's how it works. Hey, tell us about so as you know, our podcast is about Reds fans and how people became Reds fans. So
Yep.
You grew up in Reds country, Ashland, Kentucky, right?
We would tell you it was the heart of Reds country because, people that lived in greater Cincinnati could just pop down to the ballpark and actually see them in person. When I grew up, I was born in 1972, and they just weren't on TV very much, so you didn't get to see them. And the only time you got to see them, they had to be on national TV. I guess they broadcast a few games, maybe 30 or 40 games in the 70s. I don't know. They were always on the radio. And so we listened to the radio. We listened to Marty and Joe. My grandfather drove a locomotive for Armco Steel. My dad worked at the blast furnace. My uncle worked at the blast furnace. And they had the Reds games on. So we were Reds fans. But it was always an extra special treat when my dad and my uncle would build houses on the sides, because if you remember in the 70s and 80s when the steel industry went to the tank, they both got laid off, and they had to do something, so they built houses. And they bought all their lumber from a company called Patton Lumber Company in Ashland. And they were good customers. So they would give us tickets, and it would be my family, which was my mom and dad, my sister and myself, and then my cousin, his sister, and my aunt and uncle. And so, there were 8 of us. We never got 8 red tickets. We never got 8 blue seats. We might get a couple blue, then we'd get some, maybe some red. And we were thrilled if we got 8 together in green or yellow. If as long as we weren't in red, we thought it was a big day. And so it was a huge treat to come to Cincinnati. So we just grew up Reds fans. It's all we knew. It was our only professional team that was sort of kind of close to us, and something that Cincinnati fans don't want to hear. Football, it was all about the Steelers because we were almost as close to Pittsburgh as we were to Cincinnati. And frankly, in the 70s, it was a steel curtain, the big red machine, and that's still what it is in my heart.
Well, we won't talk about that.
You know what? I root for the Bengals as long as they're not playing the Steelers, which is a huge improvement from where I was 20 years ago.
Fair enough.
Was Ashland kind of split between the Pirates and the Reds at all? Like Columbus was split between the Indians and the Reds?
You know what? There certainly were some Pirates fans. That whole family time frame in the 70s. So we certainly had some of that. But where I'm from was Don Gullett territory, and everyone was a Don Gullett fan. I've heard Don Gullett's name since I knew my parents' names. Everyone knew Don Gullett. So my core group of people and the people in the city of Ashland were certainly Reds fans. And, when we were kids playing on Sharon Road, I played with all these guys. They, all of us the same age. We would play rundown, and it was Johnny Bench behind the plate. And, those were the names I grew up with, and the names I still love today. And I can't believe I know these guys personally now. It's just amazing.
Who were you? If somebody was behind the plate there at Johnny Bench, did you play a particular player?
You know what? I love Joe Morgan. I loved his little, chicken thing. But Pete Rose for me was always my guy. I mean, number 14. I remember when I started playing basketball, I couldn't be number 14. Somebody was number 14, and I was going to be 41, but then I ended up being number 3 for a while, because I also, in addition to my Reds, again, goes back to TV. We didn't get the Reds, but we got a ton of Atlanta Braves games. So I would watch the Braves in the 80s when Del Murphy was like king. And this was of course was after the Big Red Machine. So those guys were mostly gone or older. I mean, Pete was still around. Johnny was around for a while, but I became a bit of a Braves fan, and they were terrible. I mean, they had basically had Del Murphy. They had Bob Horner was at third. Rafael, what was his name? The shortstop, Rafael Ramirez, maybe.
I think that's right.
Yeah, Bruce Benedict, he was behind the plate. I mean, I've been a baseball fan since I knew what it was. So, it's.
Do you remember? Didn't Andy Messersmith pitch for the Braves, Jack or Amanda?
I think that was in the late 70s, though.
Yeah, I don't remember that name. This would have been. I was a little bit later. That was when the TBS came out, and I really loved. I'll tell you where I learned a lot about other teams was during Braves rain delays. They would have This Week in Baseball. They would have the Baseball Bunch. I loved that stuff. I couldn't wait. I hoped it would have rained in Atlanta or wherever they were playing, and learn more about the game, the history of the game from that.
I just remember when Ted Turner was trying to promote TBS, so he wanted Andy Messersmith to wear number 17. I guess that was the Atlanta station.
Yeah.
And instead of putting his name on the back, he wanted to put channel above 17.
Oh, he was a marketer extraordinaire.
True
But
story.
we couldn't said, nah, baby, nah.
So Amanda, you played in the backyard, run down. Some people call that pickle, where you
Play pickle. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And did you play organized softball or anything like that?
I did. I played softball. I played first base, and I batted third. Loved playing first base. I still have my glove. It's huge. It's a huge. It's a Wilson A2000. I still use it. It looks comical now, though, when you see me with it. It really looks comical. But yeah, so I played that, and then I played every other sport too. I played basketball from 4th grade all the way through school. Loved basketball. Played volleyball in high school. I played all the things. Played powder puff football. We didn't have lacrosse, which I'm sorry we didn't have, because that's a sport that Marty and I have really grown to love. And I know it's huge. I think it's probably taken away some of baseball, some of the kids in baseball. Those kids that played football and baseball, I don't know that they do that as much anymore. Feel like they do a lot of lacrosse. But if there was a ball involved, I played it. God gave me some natural ability to throw, to hit, to catch. Now, if I could only master that golf ball, it would make me really happy at almost 52 years old.
Well, not everybody can be a Randy Freaking on the golf course.
I know. I hear he's pretty good.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know about that.
So you were talking about your glove. My son, Ben, he's 34, he thinks that any adult that brings a glove to a Reds game is just a weirdo. He's like, he's convinced that.
The only way you can do it as an adult is if you got like a little kid with you and you don't want to, like, I've shattered my wrist, not from baseball, but there is no scenario in which I'm sticking my hand up to catch a $20 baseball when I can go to Target or Dick's or wherever and buy another one. I am not going to sacrifice my body for a baseball. So, but if you have a little kid and they really want a foul ball and you're going to be sitting in an area where you might get one, then it's okay. But yeah, I mean, if you're like a 50-year-old dude that shows up to try to catch a ball, I mean, use your hands or just let it go, right? Because hopefully you're giving it up to some kid anyway, right?
Right. Exactly. Well, you should. I
You
mean, I
should.
think like we talked about this. We talked about this with Mayor Purval last week about if you're at our age and you catch a foul ball, that's great. Well, I've never caught one. I don't think Randy. I think Randy said he's never caught one. Between the two of us, I don't know how many games I wonder have we been to that you would just think the odds would be such that we'd get one, but. Yeah, we're at that age now where you just are sort of obligated to find a kid and turn
Yeah,
around and give it to the kid,
I
So
know. So the first one that I got, I didn't catch it. I was actually, I lived and worked in Louisville for a number of years, and I went to a lot of the Louisville Bats games. My company, which was Maker's Mark, had season tickets up in a box. But I don't really like sitting in boxes. I mean, if I had my pick, I'm sitting in the stands every game because it doesn't feel like you're at a baseball game. It feels like you're at a bar or somebody's basement in a box to me. So anyway, so I was sitting in the stands and a ball landed in my drink. Like plop, it was in the seat, it was in the cup holder, and it plopped and went right in there. And I think I kept that one.
yeah, I would.
And then the second one, I was sitting in my normal seats when Marty was working in the scout section, and a ball bounced in front of me, and then I caught it on the hop. And my cousin Hannah Green, who's actually working for the Reds this year as an intern, her second year, I gave it to her. So I mean, I've got two, I guess, but one's not a major league ball. So I don't know if that counts.
Did Marty see that happen and make any note on the broadcast?
No, you know what? He couldn't see my seat from the angle. I was kind of like under him and a little bit to his left, I guess it would have been. So no, he couldn't see it, but he knows I'm a better athlete than he is, though, Randy. Of course, that's not saying a whole lot. I'm not sure.
Well, I want to know if that's been established. We've got a wedding coming up in our family. My daughter's getting married shortly, and she played college basketball, and I and her fiance did not, and he's a big basketball fan. And I'm thinking about in my talk,
Yeah.
saying something about how he married somebody who he couldn't beat in one-on-one basketball. I don't know. I haven't quite worked out all the details.
I think you should. Just this spring, we were out in Goodyear, like picking up luggage or doing something at the complex, and it might have been. No, it was during Fantasy Week. Marty goes out to Fantasy Week, which is in January, and they have a basketball goal there at the complex. And so I was out there shooting. I mean, I can still shoot. And so Marty came out and we played a game of, I don't know, out or whatever. And I beat him. We played best of three and I beat him 2 real quick. And of course I didn't pay any attention, but there was somebody there that kind of films the whole week. And I didn't notice they were filming us. And of course, during the kangaroo court session, which is a big highlight that they do, there was lots of footage of me like swishing the ball and Marty bricking it off or shooting an air ball or whatever. But he knows I can shoot. That's been established a long time ago at Kings Island, actually.
Okay.
And there was these high school kids that were shooting at those, nets that are not fair. And nobody made one, and I went up and made 2 and won a big giant stuffed animal. So,
That's nice.
it's nice to flex every now and then when you can, I guess.
That's right, for sure.
Who were some of your players after the kind of the Pete and Johnny, Joe Morgan era?
Oh, you know what? I guess after them, I was a big Paul O'Neill fan. I love Paul O'Neill. The 90 team certainly was the team that I remember the most. I was a senior in high school. And then when they had won it, let me see, I graduated high school in May or June of 90. So I was a freshman in college when they won the World Series. And so I was a huge fan of O'Neill's. I like Sabo. Of course, everybody liked Larkin. I like Billy Hatcher, all those guys. Rijo. I mean, these are all names that are forever in my mind. And I know that's Marty's favorite team. And that was a team that, of course, went wire to wire, which I would love to see that in my lifetime again. So that was a really exciting year. And that was also the year that I met Marty Brennaman for the first time.
Oh, how'd that come about?
So my boyfriend at the time in Ashland, his family were diehard Reds fans from way back. His grandfather might have been the biggest Reds fan I knew. And he he had these big giant. He had a huge amount of hair, and little tiny guy, but tall and lanky, and wore these massive headphones. Whenever the Reds were on, he had him. He was listening. I don't care what was going on. It could be church service, and he was sitting there in headphones. It felt like. So we came up to a game. I was 19 years old. We came up to a Reds game, and the Marty and Joe potato chips. Andrew had a bag of Marty and Joe potato chips, and he wanted to get them signed. And so we sat in the garage at Riverfront, and he knew where like the players came in and the broadcasters came in. And I remember sitting on a parking curb in that parking garage for like, I felt like 3 hours. I mean, it may not have been, but it was not 20 minutes. It was a considerable amount of time. And so Marty came up, and I mean, I remember him being very nice. And I remember thinking, finally, and I had to get up off that parking, sitting on concrete. He was very nice. It was a 2-minute exchange. Marty signed the bag of chips. And then of course we couldn't eat them because Marty had signed them. And that's how I met him. If I was 19, he would have been 49 years old. And I remember thinking he was like an old man. And now here I am married to him, It's crazy how things work out, isn't it, gentlemen?
When did you guys
remember you? Did he remember you the next time he met you?
No, of course not. I mean, he meets a million people, and it's always funny. Like, I mean, how many people do you think he's met underneath the parking garage at Riverfront or Great American Ballpark? I mean, a lot. If I would have said that, I mean, maybe he would have said, "Oh yeah, I remember you." But I mean, why would he remember a 19-year-old kid from Ashland, Kentucky? And that's really, I mean, that's all I was. So no, he did not remember me. I don't even know if I met him again until I met him like for Maker's Mark, which would have been a lot of years later, 20 plus years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you get to know Joe Nuxhall very well, or?
You know what? Not very well. I knew Joe because that's how then Marty and I met each other again. I was working for Maker's Mark. I was director of field marketing, and I handled the controlled states at first. So states that have kind of like state stores, and Ohio was one of those states. But I also did Kentucky PR initially when I got hired by them. And this must have been in I think it's 2006. And I think Joe died in 2007. So again, I was a huge sports fan, and we did these specialty Maker's Mark bottles that raised money for charity, and we sold a certain number of them. They were a limited edition numbered bottles that went on sale around a race at Turfway, and then we also did another one in Lexington area that were the Keeneland bottles. And again, huge sports fan. I wanted to do the 1990 team, and I think that was our first team, and we had Chris Sabo and maybe Eric Davis sign those bottles. And then we did a Marty and Joe bottle. And that's how I met Marty and Joe. We met them at the ballpark in a conference room, and kind of went over what we were thinking about doing. They were great. I mean, so nice. Immediately signed on. Marty's funds went to the Reds Community Fund because, again, all the money, the over and above what it cost to make the bottle, all the proceeds went to charity. And then Joe's went to the Joe Nuxhall Foundation. Oh, wow. So I did get to know Joe a little bit. And then when I really got to know them it was during spring training, and we had to shoot B-roll footage for like the promos because we were selling this bottle in March. So they were already in Florida in February, and we flew them up to, I guess they may have flown into Cincinnati and then just drove down to Louisville. So Marty and Joe drove down together. And of course, we wine them and dine them and take them to dinner. And before dinner, we were sitting at the Maker's Mark Bourbon House and Lounge. And I was sitting in between Marty and Joe. Joe was on my right, Marty was on my left. And they were just talking like we're talking now. I remember I grabbed both their legs and I said, I cannot begin to tell you how happy I am as a fan that you genuinely like each other. You're good guys. You're friendly. Because it would have been an absolute letdown if they were jerks. I had no idea what these guys were going to be like. And like I like to say, little did I know where that leg grab was going to lead 17 years later. So that was sort of kind of the start of it. And we went out that night. We had dinner at Pat's Steakhouse. It was Marty and Joe, and then our master distiller. We had a whole team of folks that went. And Joe told stories. We might have been overserved. We got a limo because there was no scenario in which I could drive these guys anymore. I'm like, we got to, I work for a liquor company. You cannot get a DUI, period. You cannot drink and drive, period. So we got a limo, and they took us around, and Joe was in the back smoking a cigarette and drinking a Budweiser, and he was an absolute delight, truly a delight. So I got to know him a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Well, it seemed like Marty and Brantley developed a pretty nice relationship as well. So,
you know what? Jeff's great. Marty will say, when God took Joe Nuxhall away from me, he gave me Jeff Brantley. And they're, it's different for sure, but it's still that there were some lean years when I've been around, as you all well know, and to still have the listenership that Marty had until the day he retired speaks to the fact that it was like listening to friends. I mean, I know it was with Marty and Joe, and it certainly became that way with Marty and Jeff too.
For sure. Did your perspective as a fan change at all when you got to know Marty better? Or,
yeah, you know what? Baseball can be so idealistic. It's American Pie, the American Dream. I loved going to the ballpark on the 4th of July or Memorial Day or any of these big holidays. And then you kind of get behind the curtain a little bit. And sometimes I knew too much as a fan. And so a little bit of that mystique of baseball isn't there for me. But I will always be a fan of the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, I root for them every game. I never, maybe I don't root for certain players like I would have had I not known some of the things that I know, and things that I obviously can't share. I mean, it's inside baseball, things that happen on a team plane. I mean, I had pretty amazing access as a spouse of Marty that you can never talk about, you can never share. So, there's some players that you're probably not as big of fans. And some of the things that go on behind the scenes, the business part of it that fans thankfully don't know and shouldn't know. I mean, we don't know behind the scenes at Kroger or TQL or whatever. We shouldn't know all the inner workings of your favorite baseball team.
Now, before you
we all speculate about it, that's for sure.
Right. Everybody loves to talk about it, though.
We learned a little bit of it on the radio from Marty from time to time.
Yes, Marty will certainly give you glimpses, for sure.
Were you ever able to go to any road games before you met Marty?
Yeah, so I remember seeing them. So I lived in D.C. and Chicago before I moved to Louisville, or before I moved back to Louisville. So I saw them in Wrigley. I mean, I've been to baseball games all over the country, though. It wasn't necessarily with the Reds. I saw them at the old Veterans Stadium in Philly. Let me think. Those maybe Pittsburgh. I'm not sure. But yes, I did go to some games on the road for sure. Yeah.
Was there a favorite ballpark other than Riverfront or GABP? You think?
Well, so I've been to all the ballparks. I've been to, I've not been to the new one in Texas. That's the only one I've not been to. And then, of course, I was at some of the older ones, Old Shea Stadium. And I traveled pretty extensively with Marty. When we first got together, my job was Maker's Mark, and I covered the country as director of field marketing. So I had folks that worked for me in the big markets, LA, Chicago, Texas, Seattle. I mean, I was everywhere. And so I would basically plan my travel around the Reds schedule. I would get it. I would see where they were heading, and I would be in Washington, and I had to work, but I would also go to games. And then when we got married, I certainly went to probably 95% of the road games, or I shouldn't say the road games, on the road trips. Because if I'm in New York, I might go to one game, but I'm going to Broadway the next night, and I'm going to dinner with friends. And I mean, I had other people to see in those cities. My favorite ballparks, I love Dodger Stadium. I love that old ballpark. It doesn't feel old. I love the whole mid-century modern feel of that, the signage, the only thing I hate, and it might be the worst, besides maybe Atlanta, the traffic is a nightmare because, you're down in that ravine and there's only a couple ways to get in and out of that place. And people arrive late to that ballpark because of the traffic. And then everyone stays to the end. And so it's a nightmare getting in and out. But I love Dodger Stadium. I don't think it's called AT&T Park now. What's it called in San Francisco?
I don't know.
Well, no, not Qualcomm.
Yeah.
I don't know. AT&T Park to me with the Coca-Cola glove. Love that ballpark.
That's a great ballpark.
Yeah, it's a good one.
How about announcers? I know that Marty had a particular fondness for Bob Uecker and Vin Scully. Did you get to meet those folks along the way? I imagine you did.
Yeah, I met every one of them. I write an article occasionally. I did it weekly for a long time when Marty was still working for the Ashland Beacon, which is a weekly paper, and I wrote something called the Brennaman Report. And I spent about 3 hours with Bob Uecker interviewing him because I remember Uecker, of course, from his Bud Light commercials and all that stuff, but from Major League, the movie Major League. And I loved Mr. Belvedere as like a high school kid. I watched Mr. Belvedere, and then I would see him on the Johnny Carson show. So I didn't want to talk about baseball with him. I wanted to talk about Mr. Belvedere and what Johnny Carson was like, and Ed McMahon and Doc Severson and those guys. But talk about a funny guy. I mean, one of the funniest people you'll ever talk to. Loved him. I really like John Miller with the Giants. Of course, he was also on ESPN for a while. Gotten to know Bob Costas fairly well. Enjoy spending time with Bob. Only met Vinny a couple times. We went to his funeral, though, in L.A., and met Al Michaels there. And, I've run in some pretty cool circles that never in 1,000 years would I have ever thought a girl from Ashland, Kentucky would get to do this stuff. So I never take it for granted, and there's still a lot of pinch me moments.
Not bad. It's interesting. My wife and I were up in visiting some friends in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and we were driving home on a Sunday afternoon when the Reds were playing the Brewers. And I was like, oh, this is great. We'll listen to the Brewers broadcast and listen to Uecker. And what's interesting is he's pretty straightforward when he does the ball game. I mean, he's. I was a little. I mean, I wasn't disappointed. I was just a little surprised, but it's not a bunch of yucking it up. I mean, it's telling you.
Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's really funny if you listen to him. But Bob's a little bit of a. I mean, he's a former player, right? And I think former players come off a little differently. Marty was critical, but Marty also praised you too. I mean, Marty always says, if I'm going to praise you when you do something well, then I have the right to criticize you when you do something poorly. These guys are professionals. That's their job. And they're expected to perform a certain way. And if they don't, Marty called you out on that. Bob doesn't do that. And that's, again, he's a former player. I'm sure it's a different perspective. Marty never called out, however, people don't think they know this, when he did a ton of college work, both, basketball, he did football, he did a lot of college work. He never criticized college athletes because they're not professionals, they're amateurs. So it was not his place to say somebody wasn't hustling or somebody didn't do something right or, stupid fouls or whatever. Unlike big league ball players where you're a professional ball player and that's what I wanted as a fan. I mean, I wanted someone who was honest with me on the radio because we couldn't see them. We couldn't see them on TV like we can today.
Absolutely.
Amanda, I'm curious, when you're at Reds games, either on the road or at home, did you listen to your husband?
Yeah,
like, in or anything?
Every single pitch. I mean, and that's the thing, honestly, I miss most about him working. Going to a baseball game will never be the same for me anymore because I'm never going to sit in the stands and have an earbud in and listen to my husband work. And, the great thing about technology, I could listen anywhere. I could listen on an airplane. So I didn't miss many of his games. I mean, it was rare that I missed him. And just sitting there, I'm not a very good person to go to the game with because I'm not chatty. I don't want to talk about it. I want to watch the game and listen to him. I mean, of course I would talk, but my ideal game is to get there about 7 o'clock, pull in, go to my seat, plug that in, eat some popcorn, have a Sprite, maybe a pretzel. And that was ideal. And I'll never get that experience again, but I'm glad he's home too.
Did you ever have any interesting conversations on the way home? Like, hey, Marty, you made a great call there, or you made a bad call there, or I really didn't like that criticism of so-and-so, or
I wish I'd saved all the texts from years ago. I mean, you talk about being critical. Now I can be critical too. Like, you were mean. That was a terrible thing to say. Or back up, like take a big deep breath and back up. That is ridiculous what you're saying. Or that's wrong. You said that wrong. That's not how that happened. So yes, I listened and critiqued in real time, Randy. I didn't wait till he got off the air.
It's called constructive criticism.
One of our future
constructive criticism.
That's right.
Yeah, one of our future guests is a fellow by the name of Mike Ziliox, who used to have a Twitter account called @TitanicStruggle. Now, did you follow him or?
So I think Twitter is the single worst thing ever invented, because I was on it for like a minute. I do loads of Facebook. I do some Instagram, and that's really all I do, because people are simply vile on that site, and they say things that they would never, ever, ever say to someone's face. And I would read comments they would make about him or about me or about whatever. And I am not good at biting my tongue. And I just had to turn it off. So there were times that Mike would like tweet that stuff out, and which would then stir up a pot that Marty, granted, got himself into. So I hated all that, frankly. I hated it. Some of it was really good, and I'm glad you all wrote the book to save that stuff for all time. I don't know if he does it anymore. Does he? I guess he does some. No,
he as soon as Marty retired, he gave it up.
Yeah, I mean, because frankly, nobody says the stuff that Marty says today. I mean, they can't. They just can't do it.
They can't do it anymore.
Yeah, so, there were times he needed to be criticized. He said some things that was probably a little harsh or whatever, and got reprimanded a few times for it and made apologies. And Marty, you know what? And he does this even when we fight, frankly. He will admit when he's wrong. So when he made a comment about, what was it? The Bataan Death March, something horrible, equating something that horrible to like a long road trip, he came out and apologized immediately, because there is no scenario in which anything could ever compare to that. So there were times I did not love that Twitter stuff.
What was his wife's reaction to his getting his head shaved?
Well, let me tell you. So, I mean, I can't talk because I was like 40 pounds heavier, but his hair was terrible. And I told him that numerous times. You would look better if you would cut your hair and not do the round brush and the hairspray. I mean, it was a whole process. I remember the first time I saw that in person and live, I was like, if I didn't have to blow dry my hair and fix my hair, I wouldn't do it. And the fact that you're choosing to do all this before you go to work and nobody can touch it and it's got to be perfect, that's exhausting. So when this whole thing came about, we were in Denver. He had just turned 70 and I had just turned 40. We have the same birthday, 30 years apart. So we literally are the same people in a lot of ways. So we were in Colorado. He calls me. I'm getting ready to go to the ballpark. I'm flying home with the team. And he says, I need to tell you something. Well, if you know us, we don't start conversations like that. I'm thinking, my gosh, what's wrong? Something must be serious. He said, I need to tell you something. I was like, okay. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm getting ready to come to the ballpark. He was like, good, because if the Reds win today, I have to shave my head. And I said, what are you talking about? I mean, this is the first I'd heard of this.
Oh,
and he made this bet like back in May or something, April, May. And so he proceeds to tell me, and I could not pack up my stuff quick enough because I was not going to miss one pitch. And I remember Matt Lato started that game, and I walked in with his wife at the time, Dallas, and I was like, I hope your husband pitches like Cy Young himself today. And we get 10 wins today. And sure enough, I was actually up in the booth for part of it, and those guys would walk off the field with doing like scissor motions and I mean, it was huge. And he was nervous. I don't know if he's told this story to people. He was mad. I mean, he was glad that they won 10 games in a row. That's a great accomplishment, but he was not happy about it. And thank God his friend John Burns with Encore Technologies now called and told him about the work he was doing with the Dragonfly Foundation. And, you know, Marty got to know about them and know about those, you know, young girls who were going through cancer treatment and lost their hair, and asked if he would wear that shirt, "I'm Still Me." And so by the time the night came, I went up to the radio booth to visit him just before the game was over. And he had butterflies. He's like, I can't believe I'm going to lose my hair. I'm like, well, thank God it's only with a razor and it will grow back. But the guy that did it, Jeff Duckwall, did my hair at the time and cut Marty's hair regularly, because when you got that whole thing going on, you got to keep that up, right? You got to go every 2 weeks and get it just perfect. So he was like, Jeff has to do it. So I told Jeff, I said, don't just like buzz it immediately. Put like a number 3 or 4 guard on it and let me take a picture of it, because that's where I think he needs to keep his hair. And so Jeff did that. I took a picture. I like showed Marty, and I was like, this is the sweet spot right here. And so that's where he's kept it now. How many years later? 11, 12 years later. Thank God. Because he looks way better, doesn't he?
I remember that night in Great American. I think it's still one of the all-time best nights. I mean, everybody stayed. It was a full house. They played the Pirates.
Yep.
It was like a 2-1 game. It was a great game.
Yep.
I snuck down behind the Reds dugout, you know, so I could see it up close and personal. But that place was still packed.
It was packed.
The whole show went on.
I know. Nobody left. It was amazing.
You know, that was the night my son got married, and I'm just thinking that just reminded me, because we were at the View. He got married on a Friday night, and the reception was at the View Park, so we looked out over the fireworks and everything.
See the fireworks.
It was great. Did you ever call Marty a poofy-haired
fancy boy? No, but when I was living in Louisville, good friends of ours now, that's the first thing they called him. I never called him that. I don't think. I mean, maybe I did years ago, but I mean, I know that, you know, I know that was a name hung on him a long time ago, and it fit him, frankly.
Well, my wife agrees with you. We were at the opening day eve party that Randy threw, and she turned to me. She saw, she was standing near Marty, and she said, he looks so much better with his hair like this. I
mean, literally, I look back at pictures, and not just with his hair that big, but even like in his 50s, he looks better at 80 than he did at 50. And I hope I look better at 80 than 50. I don't think there's a chance of that happening, but, we can all hope to be Marty Brennaman one day.
That's right. Hey, so I know we're running up on time, but I'm curious, just how much rehearsal do you guys put in for your Laura's lean beef commercials? Because we all enjoy this. So. I
mean, I don't know that there's any rehearsal. We just show up and it's Amanda and Marty. I mean, that's what you see on camera. That's kind of who we are. Randy knows us a little bit. I mean, we just kind of give and take, banter back and forth, but we have truly enjoyed that. And what a great, thing to keep for all time for us to have these commercials, to be able to work with your husband like that, and to represent a product that frankly I'd used for years back in Ashland. It's been a lot of fun. It really has.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, listen, we appreciate it. Randy, any other burning questions that you want to get to?
I don't think so, Amanda. It's just great of you to come on. I really have to say, Marty has been so good to the Reds Community Fund over the years, and is still very good to the Reds Community Fund. And I really appreciate the two of you. You put in a lot of time on behalf of the Reds Community Fund, and it's just been spectacular. And I know everybody enjoyed seeing you at the opening day eve party.
Well, thank you for having me. And the work the Reds Community Fund to bring youth baseball to some of these underserved areas, I think it's so important. I mean, I hope with this team this year we get some new Reds fans that were like me, that relates to these guys and looks forward to seeing them. And I just think bringing this game to as many people as we can is important. So we will always support the Reds Community Fund and Randy Freaking and anything that you're doing.
All right. Well, thanks, Amanda, very much.
Thank you, guys.
And Jack, I think we should have Amanda back again sometime.
I think we should. Some good stories.
You let me know when. I'll be there.
Our studio audience showing its support.
I love that.
Audience. Lily made a brief appearance.
She did. She's upstairs barking now.
All right. Another standing ovation for one Amanda Brennaman.
Thank you, gentlemen. You all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
About Cincinnati, what a team, what a team, what a team. Each man and lady from 1 to 80, how they scream.
I guess Marty's out of that song demographic then, because Marty's 81.